Welcome to the Follow the Leaders podcast, where we get a glimpse into the minds and lives of exceptional leaders and hear about their experiences, insights, and strategies for success. On today's episode, we'll hear from one heart-centered, effective leader and hear about their wisdom and perspective. So get ready to follow along. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so glad that you're here, and I have been loving hearing how the show has been impacting and inspiring you. So keep that feedback coming. Please leave a rating or a review on whatever app you're listening to. It really helps me get the word out about the show. Today's episode is going to be really intriguing. We are talking with Jeff Eschliman today. Jeff is an executive coach with 30 years of experience ranging from military combat to the corporate boardroom. He is a sought-after expert for building and scaling results-driven teams, and his leadership style is characterized by personal development, consistency, and a tenacious work ethic. Jeff has developed a Zen for Success model, which he uses to create harmony and success in his clients' lives. I'm really excited to talk with Jeff today because tenacity and Zen aren't always put together in the same sentence, but I'm very intrigued. So congratulations on all of your success and impact, Jeff, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Jamie. So delighted to be with you.
So I always like to start by asking my guests, can you paint a picture of what your work life looks like now? How are you serving your clients? What are you doing let's say, in any given week with your work? Fill us in.
Yeah, a couple of different things. So I work with clients one-on-one, mostly CEOs or founders, and I work with their organizations typically. And so I will engage with my clients, first of all, exploratory to find out what they have going on in their life and what kind of things, what do they want to work on, right, before I start employing my own perspective. But I really love to work with CEOs and founders that are already running successful organizations, but it's typically one of two things. They're either running the organization and they have, let's say, other parts of their life that aren't in harmony, whether it would be their, physical shape a lot of times, or it would be a relationship that might need some work, let's say. And so I really enjoy working with those CEOs. And then the other really fun part for me is then working with their leadership teams, either whether that's building the business plan or not. I'm not building the business plan, but I'm guiding them as they build it, and then working on their leadership development. And that's what I enjoyed doing in my corporate life before I retired from that. And I'm having so much fun doing it as a coach these days.
That's really cool. So are you working with people mostly remotely? Are you visiting their headquarters? How are clients working with you these days?
It's both. In my local market here in the Phoenix market, the majority actually of my clients are from my previous career in home building. And so I work with a lot of contractors and I work with a lot of home builders, what I would call my people. And so anybody's my people. I've worked with leaders in El Salvador. That was a lot of fun. So working with an international client, that was via virtual. And I will do the virtual, but I just really love working in the same environment, Jamie. I think there's just a richness that comes with that kind of personal interaction. And that's just what my joy is. And so that's how I do the majority of it.
Very cool. There is something really unique about being circled up around a table together or in a room with people, feeling their energy. There is, like you and I are meeting virtually right now for this recording, which is amazing that we can do that. That is the gift of technology, is that we can connect with people outside of our local area, but there is just something really unique. One of my work projects is that I lead a personal and professional development group for moms that own businesses. And of course, during COVID, we went to virtual so we could still stay connected. And then as soon as I sort of figured that demand for the virtual meetings would stay really high because, everybody's super busy with their lives and their businesses. But it was super interesting that when I put out how do we want to meet? Who wants to meet virtually? Who wants to meet in person? Almost everybody wanted to go back to in person. And it's just been really interesting. So I completely understand that. So I'm very intrigued that your client base is heavily weighted towards the industry that you are in. So tell us more about that. You wouldn't think about necessarily that industry being super drawn to leadership development, but I absolutely love to hear that that's happening. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like for that industry?
Sure. My personal belief is it's twofold. One, it's occurring this way because I spent a 30-year career in the profession, rising really through the ranks from when I started right out of the military. I was a young site leader, and that's really where I cut my teeth in leadership. And as I progressed through my career, varying levels of management and leadership, I made a lot of connections. Another unicorn opportunity for me is I work for the same company for 30 years, which is fairly rare in not only the industry that I'm in, but it's fairly rare, I think, in the United States and the world anymore.
Yeah.
So one, it's a fact that I made all of these connections in a 30-year career. And then the other side of the coin, which you alluded to, Jamie, is you're exactly spot on. My industry did not have a ton of, what would you call it, organized or intentional leadership development. So mine was built on my own. And that doesn't mean that, my company didn't provide me with resources. They sent me to Franklin Covey and, other things like that were helpful in my career. But if you're not the kind of person who essentially asks for it, then it's just not super prevalent. Now, it is a lot more prevalent for like the sales side of the equation with, continuing education and things like that. But I came up in production and I came up in operations. And again, it's just a really big need. And so that's when I decided to retire after giving it the kind of all in corporate, right? What I call running into the corporate fire, which was a blessing and a curse. I was able to be super successful, financially and all these other ways, but it's, the curse side is, you're still running into fire every day. And so what I'm doing now is just much more liberating for me to be able to do, all of the things that I wanted to do and all of the things that I could do as a senior executive leader, but now I don't have to do the stuff that I don't want to do. So it's awful fun for me.
That's really, really interesting. Okay. So first, let's start with, how did you decide, you're retiring from a 30-year successful career? What made you say, okay, I'm going to actually start a company now and go work in a same area, but different way, versus just being like, okay, 30-year career done. I'm wrapping that up and now it's time to hit the golf course.
Right. Well, I'm a big believer in purpose. So that's if you read any of the statistics around when people retire, and when I retired from this corporate thing, I was 53 years old. So I had no intention of like hanging it up and then just playing golf, because I'm a big believer in purpose. And I believe if you don't have something that you're stretching and striving and trying to grow for, and this might be in an aside, but I have every intention to live to 103.
Love it.
And as a part of that mission, I need to stay healthy and vibrant. And a part of my mission, and I'll get to your real question, which was, why did I decide to do it this way? And again, I think it sounds a little bit corny, and it sounded corny to me to say, I'd heard people say before, like, what if you could do all of the things that you love to do, but you didn't have to do any of the stuff that you didn't want to, and you could craft a life and you could craft a business that worked like that. And that's what I decided. I started studying like all the things that I love to do, the leadership development, and sitting down with people one-on-one and helping them grow and growing myself. And I would do it for free. But, fortunately I get paid well to do this. So it's like it's the best of both worlds for me.
That's really awesome. Yeah, a lot of our listenership is entrepreneurs. And so we can relate to being like, okay, how do I craft my career in a way that is all the things that I want to be doing and have that autonomy and that hand on the dial of what we're doing, and for pay, which is best of both worlds, like you said. Exactly.
Beautiful.
All right. So if we back up, you are a combat veteran and a corporate boardroom veteran. And so I'm just so curious about your career path. I know you shared a little bit about your corporate career, but can you just sort of zoom out and tell us what your leadership path to this point looked like?
Right. So it actually it goes back a little further than that. It even started on a football field in high school. And so that's where the teamwork and that's where the leadership for me really started to emerge. Not that I was a strong leader, but seeing good leadership on a football field and then playing as a team. And then I had a passion for service, I would just call it. So I signed up for the Army, very peacetime when I went in. But while I was in the military, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. And so I found myself in Saudi Arabia, and then I found myself in Iraq. I drove an armored personnel carrier into the Euphrates River Valley in Iraq. And I was 20 years old when I was coming back from that experience. And I knew that I'd been asked to do the worst things that I'd ever have to do in my life. And I'd seen the worst things that I would ever see. Mm-hmm. And so far today, at age 54, that's still true. And so it set a lot of context for me. I knew the rest of my life was going to be easy after that. And so I came back from the military after I got out, and I went, fortunately, I literally have grown up in this home building. My dad was a house painter. So I've literally been on job sites here locally in my market since I was about 8 or 9 years old. And so I came back, and with the same painting job that I had, and I just happened to be out on a home builder's site, and they said, hey, we have this assistant superintendent position open up. Would you like to start here? And that was the beginning of a 30-year career. And so, as I said in the beginning, I was a site manager. I had contractors coming out to get homes built. And that's where I cut my teeth in leadership, because I've oftentimes referred to my industry here locally as the wild, wild west. And it is, because there's not a lot of sophistication, and that fit my model because I wasn't super sophisticated, but I grew along the way. And I've had to do a lot of, maybe we should talk about Toastmasters. That might even be a great segue into what leadership development can look like.
Yeah, let's chat about that.
So it was 2007, and I just got promoted to be the director of construction. So it was the first time I had a job that was solely in the office. And now I was in charge of multiple leaders. And I used to be the person, when we sat around in the superintendent's meeting, that, I would speak if spoken to, right? But I wouldn't necessarily articulate my ideas or challenge other people's. It was more of the, just listen along, take notes, shake your head up and down, don't make direct eye contact, right? Because I didn't want to be the center of attention. I was good out there talking one-on-one to people. But then when I became this higher level position, I was like, well, this isn't going to work. I've got to be able to stand up now in front of this group and lead the meeting and things of this nature. So that's the first time I found Toastmasters, was 2008. And I received what they call the competent leader and the competent communicator. And so you have to start delivering speeches. And I highly recommend Toastmasters to any young leader, because it's not only great for the speaking ability, but it's just such a great forum to get feedback from other professionals. Very low cost, very well structured. Toastmasters, a big fan.
Oh, thank you for that recommendation. That's really good to know that was a key building opportunity. That's really great.
Absolutely.
So I saw recently a post of yours about how balance is not realistic for a CEO or an executive leader. And I'm sure that everybody listening is nodding their head that is not realistic, but you say that harmony is. And I know that harmony is a big part of your core teachings. And so I would just love to learn more about what you see as the difference between balance and harmony, and how a leader can aim more for harmony than balance, and what your recommendations are on that.
Right. And I became pretty, I guess I would either say famous or infamous at the end of my corporate career for goofing on work-life balance, just because here's the problem. It's the wrong measurement, right? Are you somehow supposed to believe that you're going to put everything from work in one bowl? Like, think of the old apothecary scale, right? There's one on the credenza behind me. Are you supposed to put everything from work in one of those bowls and everything else in your life in the other, and somehow those bowls are supposed to hang in balance? So it's the wrong measurement. So that's why I tend to goof on work-life balance. And at the end of the day, especially if you're a busy corporate executive or you're an entrepreneur and you're running a business, I mean, let's face it, you spend a lot of time in the craft of your organization. And so if you spend a third of your time sleeping, a third of your time probably is generous or is an underestimate of what you spend on your business, then what are you doing in those other parts with your physical health or your mental health or your family or your hobbies or any of these other things in life? So to start with, that's what I believe, the what's wrong with the idea of balance. So the way I arrived at harmony was the fact that I worked in a corporation, so it was very busy quarterly, right? We were always doing quarterly updates or business plan updates at the end of the year. And so at the end of March, I would be super busy because it was at the end of the quarter and we were like, how did we do? And make the plan for the next quarter and reporting and all of those things that happen in corporate. But then by the middle of May, in the middle of a quarter, you could be in a lot better shape. So what I learned to do was proactively and intentionally map these things out in my life. And I do the exact same thing now with entrepreneurs because they might not have that same, there's some quarterly and yearly planning, but in my estimation, it's not as intense as what I was experiencing corporate. But there's still, if it's not the corporate that I'm talking about, it's depending on the business. You're either out there alongside your sales team, making sure that pipeline of sales continues to be robust, or you're tweaking the product, or your business development, or you're looking for a new market, or again, you're building a brand new product. The entrepreneur is always, seemingly always busy and always on, right? And so you have to, again, the word that I love to use is intentionally. And that's actually how you build the Zen, is through intentional practices.
I really am thinking about the tenacity, the boldness, the ambition mixed with the Zen. It's impossible as an entrepreneur to only do one or the other, to have a switch that goes on and off. We have to be pushing hard and also taking care of ourselves, setting new goals, and also accepting reality of what is. So I would love to hear, what do you recommend for a busy leader who is sprinting through a busy season? Or, in my work, I'm a summer camp co-director. And so certainly there are seasons, literally and figuratively. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So let's talk about a handful of fundamentals, right? And so there's certain time blocks that are important for fundamentals. So let's just start with daily. So I'm a guy that's carpe diem, right? So seize the day. And I actually have a carpe diem practice every single day. And if you can control what are the most controllable parts of a day? The very beginning of the morning is the most controllable, and the afternoon/evening part is the second most controllable, and the part in the middle, depending on how good you are at it, I'm pretty good at the entire day. But if you take a look at even the beginning morning part, if you can do the handful of fundamental things that if you do every day, and that's the problem with most people when they get busy, is most people don't give an individual day enough credit. So if you can do these fundamental things, and let's just name off 3 or 4 of them that if you did every morning, which is, let's say, be mindful, whatever that means to you. You can use gratitude, you can use prayer, you can use meditation, you could use yoga. And if you do things like yoga, you can even get twofers, right? Because the other thing that I'm going to mention is movement. So if you move well, so if you get mindful and then you move, even if that's just go out and take a walk around the block. So I walk somewhere every single morning, and I do gratitude and I do meditation and I journal my gratitude. So if you can do these fundamental things, then I can't remember who that was, Rory Vaden or somebody said, like the miracle morning or win the morning. But if you can win those fundamental things each morning before your workday even gets started, like I can't remember, it's probably like 20 years ago, Julia Morgenstern wrote a book called Never Check Email in the Morning, right? Which kind of dates it because, like once you do any of these things, whether you start, doom scrolling social or check your emails or whatever, you will be down a rabbit hole. And so that's why those fundamental mornings or evenings, and I have both, I call them AM, PM bookends in my Carpe Diem process, right? So that's the day, win a day. And then the next is win a month, right? So at the end of every month, I take an entire day off, and I was doing this 15 years of my career. And fortunately, I worked for a company for a long time, so I had a lot of vacation, and I could take an actual vacation day. It was generally either the last Monday or the last Friday of any given month. So 2 weeks from now, I will have what I call my day of Zen. And so I take an entire day, Jamie. Now, first of all, I have more written goals than anybody else that I know. And of course, I don't know everybody, but of anybody that I've ever met in my life, I have more written goals. I have probably twice as many because I just have a lot of fun that I'm trying to have and a lot to do. So it takes me an entire day. I spend the first half of the day just reflecting and reviewing the previous month. So I will say in a couple of weeks, how did this previous month go? And things go well, things don't go well. And I just review all of that. And then I spend the second part of that day building a plan to crush the next month, right? So if you've ever had somebody say, like, oh my gosh, can you believe it's almost June, right? We're almost halfway through this year, right? I never say that. I don't let things sneak up on me. I'm super proactive. That's how you do it.
Okay. I totally agree. It's taking those pause point moments. I'm not as diligent about taking the time quote off to do that, but that is a very good goal for me to take a little bit more time to actually pause and do that. But anytime you take stock of what has happened in the past, look forward to the future, check in with yourself now. I mean, that makes such a big difference. So I have a question. When you walk into a boardroom full of construction executives and you talk to them about taking a moment to do gratitude in the morning, how does that go over?
Yeah. Well, I start off by saying, like, I'm going to suggest something to you here. And I literally do corporate trainings on just this. And I say, this is going to seem a little bit unconventional, right? Where this guy's going to come in here. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things that would come up in normal professional conversation. But I'm going to suggest something to you right now with the gratitude up front, because this is what I say about written gratitude. An intentional, written, daily practice of gratitude is simultaneously one of the most subtle and yet powerful things that I have ever, and I mean with a capital E, ever implemented in my life. And so I ask people, I'm like, even though that seems a little bit unconventional, here's what I'm asking you to do. Trust me and try it. Tell me your life doesn't end up better. If you write good things down every day that are happening in your life, because if you want more of anything, you have to get your brain focused on it. And that's essentially what gratitude is doing. You're training your brain to focus on what good is happening in your life. And if you want more good, train it to think that way.
And the science totally backs up what you're saying. Exactly. Having a gratitude practice, that and the loving kindness meditation, those are the two most researched and well-supported practices. I'm coming from a yoga and mindfulness background. And so you are speaking my language. I have tattoos on my body about those exact ideas. So we are on the same page about that. I really love it. So if we think about applying that pause point to be grateful and find moments of gratitude, acknowledge what it is in your life that you are most grateful for. When you're balancing that with goal setting, I've heard in the past people push back against, well, if I'm seeking more, I'm aiming higher, I'm wanting something I don't have. That's like what goal setting is. I've heard people push back on how that is almost the opposite of being grateful for what you have. Or someone says that, how do I both be so grateful and appreciative for everything that I have in my life and not feel greedy about wanting more, achieving more, setting these high goals? And so I'm just really curious, like, is this something that you find, it's sort of that, again, returning to that idea of like Zen versus tenacity and how you can hold both at the same time. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I'm going to use the last line of my core written purpose. So I have a whole paragraph that says who I am and what I'm trying to do here in the world. And then I love the last line because it's brief. It's a line right from Jim Rohn. And it says, I want to be happy with what I have, comma, while I pursue what I want. And Jamie, I'll go to my grave trying to do that every single day. And so Jim Rohn, just to stick on him for a minute, used to say, how high will a tree grow? It's going to grow to the height that its nature tells it can grow to, right? And it is natural to want to grow, to want to achieve. The world wants abundance. I mean, look at what is technology good or bad? It's a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, the technology that's even evolved in my mere 54 years has been all the way from black and white TV to phones with dials on them, now to the phone in my pocket that has more power than what took the first rocket to the moon. And so the world and nature wants abundance. It wants to grow, even if it's a weed, right? A weed wants to grow. And that's why they're so stubborn, and that's why they're so persistent, because growth is a natural thing. And that is the dynamic tension that's occurring in a goal, right? When you put something out there and it makes you, that's the fun part of goal setting, or the fun part of running a business as an entrepreneur is you're setting things out there that are hard to do, because again, that's another thing that I think has lost a lot of focus in the last, era, working hard and achievement. And I'm a big fan of abundance and manifesting and all that. But I'm also a big fan of like reading the books that it takes to understand something a different way, and then take different actions and try and do scary things like go to Toastmasters and give a speech and have people tell you, how you could get better. Those are not necessarily comfortable, but that's why getting outside of your comfort zone is a good thing to do.
I love that perspective, and I love your comparison to nature. I think it fits perfectly with that exact question that makes total sense. And I even think about, I have 3 teenage kids. And so even in parenting, I sort of have this is a different topic than entrepreneurship, but sort of the same balance of like knowing when to push my kids to, aim higher and when to take the pressure off. I think we're in a new moment in time where we're respecting kids' natural abilities and natural tendencies and not pushing them, but also it's our responsibility as parents to show them what is possible. And so it's just, I don't have the answer to that, and I don't think any of us really do, but it's just sort of that same idea that we can, exactly what you said, be grateful for what we have, and also comma. I loved that. The comma there was really key. I loved that. So thank you for sharing that. That was really great.
Absolutely.
So you also talk about the difference between success on paper and success in real life. And so that's really intriguing to me. And so I'd love to know, what do you see as the mix up there and the difference?
Sure. I think, who was it? Mike Tyson that said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. That's life. So what success looks like on paper is when you build a business plan. What success really is, though, is at the end of any given day or at the end of any given week or month, like, how many sales did we get? Jim Rohn used to say, hey, I've got this little box and I need to write a number in it, right? And then people would start making excuses. Hey, the problem with excuses is they don't fit in this box. So that's what success in life looks like. Success is results. And so results is your bank account and how well your kids turn out and whether your business grows or whether you call your mama and tell her that you love her. Like, all of those things, the beauty is everybody gets to decide for themselves what success looks like.
Yes.
But the problem is a lot of people will not even write it down. They just have an idea of what success is in their head. But if you don't go through the trouble of like writing it down, and I do mean even the things like call your mama and tell her you love her, then it's like the question would be, is it okay to be winning in business but failing in your health? Is it okay, to be winning financially, but not be a good parent, right? And again, these are just rhetorical questions for the audience to think about, or anybody individually. So that's what I think that's success to me, is what are the results? That's the difference.
There's a phrase in teaching. So my yoga instruction is with kids and families. And so there's a phrase that we use a lot when I'm training other instructors, is that planning is important, but the plan is not. That it's important to do the planning work, to think about what you want to happen, to set sort of a general idea of what direction you want to head with a class, with a series, with a relationship with a student. But then in the moment, that plan is not that important. You need to assess the situation in the moment, adapt the situation in the moment, because sticking with a plan that you created, that we're going to do these exact activities and we're going to get through this exact lesson plan, but then in the moment the kids are not having it, they're emotional, they have some other need that's happening, you've got a kid who just isn't going to sit still for that activity, and you guys need to move, you need to be ready to toss that plan out the window and in order to have a successful class. So I completely agree with that. And I think it's so interesting because I really push back against the even idea of like writing out a formal business plan. And luckily in my work as an entrepreneur, business owner, I don't need to, I can adjust my plan as much as I want. I'm very thoughtful about where I want to head, but I don't want to say what's going to be in 5 years, because if I had done that 5 years ago, there's no way I would be sitting here talking to you right now. I would have been stuck to some other idea. I just do the next right thing and it leads me to some new and exciting path that I wouldn't have predicted, but I'm so glad to be on. So
Beautiful.
I will second exactly what you said about that. So you talked a little bit about your time on your football team as a kid, but I always like to ask my guests about what they were like as kids. When we think about what makes up a leader, what makes kind of the, how do we get here? I like to listen and learn about what my guests were like as children. So when you think back to your high school years or even younger than that, like what was young Jeff like? Were you a natural leader? I think you mentioned you were a little quieter at that time, but yeah, what were you like as a kid? Was there tendencies towards leadership at the time? Fill us in.
I love this because it's the classic, is leadership nurture or nature? And let me tell you who I was as a young boy. I was a shy, dorky, not leader, quiet. And I'll tell you when it changed. It changed when I got on that football field. And I'll tell you why it changed, is because I made physical contact with another person and it was visceral and it felt great. And I know that's not how everybody's wired, but for me, Jamie, it was a trigger. And when I hit somebody physically, and like we were both out there for the same mission, it felt great. And that started to change for me. And I was still somewhat shy, even through high school and all of that. And then I'll tell you when it changed again is when I went into the military. And I went into basic training, and I highly recommend the military for anybody, not because there's the potential to go to war, but just going through the military itself and through any type of basic training, that quintessentially turned me into a man quickly. And so again, it was physically, it was mentally, it was as a team. And I think one of the most beneficial parts as a leader is being able to be well led. And that's what I saw on football field. That's what I saw when I went in basic training. That's what I saw in wartime. And I was just a private, E4 driving an armored personnel carrier. I wasn't in charge of anybody but me, right? But seeing that leadership in that kind of circumstance where it is the ultimate, that's early Jeff. And again, that wartime experience gave me a lot of perspective on how both fragile life is and unfortunately what people are able to do to each other. And it also gave me the perspective on how I wanted to live my life going forward, where it was, I can use that experience to talk about it and talk about, the hardly anything good can come from a war, but, a country was liberated. So oftentimes that's what has to happen. So
that's really interesting. I was especially like when you were describing the time on the football field, that physical contact, it is interesting sometimes seeing or feeling your own, I'm going to use the word power. It's not really what I mean, but your impact, can be what encourages someone to take the next steps towards growth or leadership. And that impact can be, for me, it wasn't physical. It was that I figured out that I could organize a group towards a specific goal as a young kid. I was creating babysitters clubs or organizing my cousins to do shows, or, in middle school, I started a petition in my middle school to get our principal to do something, that kind of thing. Right. So that was my first taste of my own impact. And so it's just interesting that yours was on the football field in a different way, but sort of shows, yeah, I guess the power. It's not power in a control way, but power in what we can accomplish. So that was really interesting.
It's where you start to bridge the gap between who you are. I mean, this is very, Viktor Frankl, very Maslow, right? Where you start to bridge the gap between who you are and who you could be. And if I could summarize my whole like game plan, that when I work with CEOs and companies, that's where we start is are we being who we could be here?
I love that so much. That's really great. So if you think back to your first day, let's go with your first day at your corporate job. If you could give yourself a message for the beginning of your corporate job with the wisdom and perspective that you have now, what would you tell Jeff of 32 years ago? What would you tell him?
Yeah, I would tell him to figure out who Earl Nightingale is and then listen to The Strangest Secret. And anybody in this audience could put it into YouTube right now. And it is, I'll call it this, Jamie, 32 minutes of the most densely packed personal development that I have ever, and again, capital E, ever. And again, I have read or listened to more books than anybody that I know. And I don't know everybody, but next to the people I know, I've read or listened to more books. And The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, written in 1982, is the most densely packed 32 minutes of personal development that I have, again, ever encountered. And it would not be hyperbole to say that I've listened to it 3,000 times.
Wow.
And we're in graduation season right now. So The Strangest Secret is, so I'll often give somebody that's graduating high school or college, I give them a nice card, I give them a nice gift card, and then I also give them a copy of The Strangest Secret because I wish somebody would have put it in my hands. And it has the secret to how life really works in 32 minutes. And when I give this to a new person, I say, hey, I would like you to listen to this every day for a week, and then listen to it every week for a month, and then listen to it every month for a year. It is that densely packed, and it will go to work on you.
Wow. Well, I'm going to take that as personal homework. So I will definitely be checking that out. I have not heard of it. So that is a very high endorsement from you. We'll link that in the show notes so that people can easily find it and they can do the homework assignment along with me. That's really great. So I have a few last wrap-up questions for you that are a little more rapid fire. Does anyone come to mind that you could shout out who believed in your leadership skills that led to you being here, maybe even before you believed in them?
Oh, I've got a handful. My mother and father to start with. And then I had two specific bosses in my career. One's name was Rick Stark, and then the other was Andy Warren. And he was the one that I worked for about the last 12 years of my career. And both of those folks saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And they fortunately, they saw that. Fortunately, they nurtured me and they let me grow.
I love that. All right. You have a lot of irons and a lot of fires. And so I'm curious, is there one tool or strategy that you use for staying organized and effective in your life, whether that's a tech tool or a paper tool or a system that you use to stay organized?
I might be one of only 5 people left on the planet that actually use a Franklin Covey planner. I've been using it since 2004. And my life is obviously in email and an electronic calendar, but I'm still a write things down guy. I write out every day what I'm going to do, including this podcast, and then it helps me think about and prepare for them.
Okay, I love that. I don't know what that exact planner is, but I also write out my day, including what time I have to leave for things. That's the only reason that I end up on time for things is because I don't just write down what time they start. I map out exactly what time I have to leave from one place to the other. That's one of my hacks. All right, my last question for you is: if you had a day off, totally off, you could accomplish no tasks in your planner. You could meet with no clients. You could not read any personal development books. You just had to just take a day off. What is one activity you would do and one place you'd go to get something to eat?
Well, definitely it would be on a lake. Or on the ocean. I would be fishing. So that's what I would do. And I don't have to plan or like I do it like a couple of times a month. And where would I eat? I'm pretty boring. I would probably just grab a salad and go, I want something healthy and I want something nutritious.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for talking with me and sharing so many of your perspectives and ideas. I know you have a ton of resources out there for leaders on your website and everything. So can you tell listeners where to find you and learn more about working with you directly or learning from you online?
Absolutely. So the best place to go, you could either hit me up on LinkedIn. That's the social platform that I'm the most prevalent on. My website is the best place. So that's jeffeschliman.com. So Jeff, and then Eschliman is ESCHLIMAN.com. And on my website, as you said, there's harmony assessments to find out how much harmony you have in your life. You can do a business assessment. I'm a 7A certified gravitas coach. So that's the business side of the equation. And then like we talked about the strangest secret, and you were going to link that in the show notes. Also on my website is my most recommended books and links to grab all of it. And they're broken down by category. So personal development and fitness and things of that nature. So the website's the best place.
Okay, great. Well, we will for sure link that in the show notes. Your website is such a resource. There's so many videos for people to check out and learn from you and benefit from all of your expertise. So thank you so much for diving into these topics with me and getting a little nuanced on these topics with me. I really enjoyed our chat, and I look forward to watching what you have coming up next.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the listeners. We'll be back next time with another intriguing interview. Follow the Leaders is produced by Lit Path Studios, and music is by Shane Ivers. You can hear more about this show and all the other podcasts at Lit Path Studios by going to www.litpathstudios.com.